She only comes back once a year, on my birthday, and I'm only allowed to have her for 24 hours, not a minute more. That's the part I don't say out loud to anyone, because it sounds like the kind of thing a lonely man invents to make loneliness feel organized. But it's real. It's been real for 20 years. The same day. The same strange certainty. The same goodbye that lands in my chest like a stone. Her name is Claire, and every time she returns, something in my life changes. Not always in a dramatic way. Sometimes it's so small I don't realize it until months later, like a thread pulled from a sweater. But the result is always the same. I'm never the exact same man after she leaves. Today I turned 47, and I woke up with that familiar pressure behind my ribs, like the air itself was waiting. I did what I always do. I cleaned the kitchen even though it was already clean. I ran the faucet until the water got hot, then turned it off and listened to the pipes tick. I set out 2 mugs. 2 mugs makes no sense for a man who lives alone, but my hands don't need sense. They need ritual. Outside, the day had that late fall look, even though it's still technically summer here. A dry wind, a pale sky, the kind of light that makes everything feel a little honest. My street was quiet except for a lawnmower down the block and the occasional car drifting by like it had somewhere better to be. I kept checking the time without meaning to. Not because I was excited, because I was scared. If you've waited long enough for something you want, you eventually start fearing the moment it finally arrives. You start wondering what it's going to cost you this time. At 4:17 p.m., there were 3 soft taps on my front door, not loud, not urgent. Just confident enough to say, I'm here and I'm not asking permission. My breath caught the way it always does, and for a second I stood there with my hand on the doorknob, like I could hold my whole life back with a little pressure. Then I opened it. Claire stood on my porch wearing a light jacket she didn't need, her hair pulled back, a paper bag held close to her chest like it contained something fragile. She looked like herself and not like herself at the same time. Same crooked smile. Same eyes that used to look at me like I was the safest place in the world. But there was a tiredness there I didn't recognize. Happy birthday, she said, soft and careful. Her voice still did that thing. It still reached places in me nothing else can reach, like an old song you forgot you loved until the first note hits. Hey, I managed. You made it. She gave a small nod, like the words cost her something. Yeah, I made it. That should have been simple. It wasn't. I stepped aside. Come in. She hesitated, just a heartbeat, before crossing the threshold. Every year she does that. Like the doorway is a line in the sand, and she's never sure she deserves to cross it. The house smelled like coffee and old wood, and the quiet of a man who doesn't entertain much. Her gaze moved through the room like she was taking inventory, like she was storing details away for later. You changed the curtains, she said. Last spring, I told her. Figured the place needed to look like someone still lives here. She smiled, but it didn't last. Her attention drifted to the clock on the wall, then back to me, like she caught herself doing it. My stomach tightened. We both know the rule, even though we've never named it. 24 hours. She arrives in the late afternoon. She's gone before the day turns over. It's as if the world will punish her if she stays past midnight. She set the paper bag on the kitchen table. I brought you something. She always does. That's part of it too. A gift. A small thing to prove she didn't forget I exist during the other 364 days. You didn't have to, I said. And I hated how my voice sounded, like I was trying to be casual with something sacred. I wanted to, she replied. Then, like she couldn't help it, she added, I always want to. I started the coffee fresh, even though she hadn't asked. It gave my hands something to do besides reach for her. We sat across from each other at the table the way we always do, like there's an invisible line we've agreed not to cross. Her hands wrapped around the mug when I set it down, palms pressed to the warmth like she needed it. I noticed her fingers looked a little thinner than last year. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself a lot of things. How have you been? She asked. The question was so normal it almost hurt. I gave her the version I always give. Same as ever, fixing old radios. Eating too much diner food, pretending I like the quiet. That got a real smile out of her, brief but bright. It made my chest ache in the familiar way, like joy and grief live right next door to each other. You always did like your little routines, she said. I liked them better when you were in them, I said before I could stop myself. For a second, her eyes lifted to mine, and something raw showed there, something like regret, something like fear. Then she looked down at her coffee as if the surface might offer safer answers. We talked about harmless things after that. The weather, how the town keeps changing, a new bakery down the street that sells cinnamon rolls, the kind she used to steal bites of right out of the bag when we were younger. She laughed at that memory, quiet and surprised, like she hadn't meant to. And then, just like that, she checked her phone. It was quick, almost automatic. But it landed hard. My mind went where it always goes. Someone is waiting for her. Someone gets her on the ordinary days. Someone hears her laugh without it costing them an entire year of waiting. I kept my voice steady. You don't have to rush. She looked up fast, like I'd caught her doing something wrong. I'm not rushing. But her shoulders were tight, and her eyes flicked to the clock again. I reached for the paper bag, partly because I needed something to anchor me. Inside was a small wooden box, smooth and carefully made, the kind of thing you can't buy in a hurry. When I opened it, there was an old key lying on the felt lining. My key, the one from the apartment I had when we first fell into each other's lives. The one I'd handed her with a grin and a dumb kind of faith saying, "You don't have to knock." My throat went dry. "Claire, where did you get this?" "I found it," she said, "when I was cleaning." "You kept it?" I asked, and the question came out smaller than I wanted. "Of course I did," she whispered, like it should have been obvious, like it was the easiest truth in the world. I stared at the key in my palm. It looked ordinary, worn brass, small teeth, but it held an entire version of my life inside it, the one where she didn't vanish and I didn't learn how to pretend I was fine. "What does it mean?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted past me toward the hallway, toward the rooms she never goes into. Then she looked back at the key, and her voice softened. "It means I didn't forget," she said. "Not for one day." My chest tightened so hard it felt like I couldn't get a full breath. "Then why?" I began, and my voice almost broke. "Why do you keep doing this?" Her eyes glistened, but she blinked it back like she's had years of practice. "Because this is the only way I know how to keep you safe," she said. So quietly I almost thought I imagined it. Safe. The word didn't make sense in my kitchen, with the coffee and the curtains and the 2 mugs, but the way she said it made my skin prickle. "Safe from what?" I asked, leaning forward without meaning to. She shook her head, and the motion was small but final. "Not today," she murmured. "I can't. Not today." That was new. She stood up abruptly, and for a moment I thought she was leaving right then, right there, before the sun even went down. But she didn't move toward the door. She just stood at the edge of the room like her body needed distance, even if her heart didn't. "I should go soon," she said. My stomach dropped anyway, because every goodbye with her starts long before she actually leaves. "Already?" I asked, and I hated the way the words sounded. Like a boy. Like someone who doesn't understand time. "I don't want to be late," she replied. "Late for who?" I almost said. Late for what? But I didn't, because there are questions that feel less like curiosity and more like a knife you're holding by the blade. And I've been bleeding for 20 years. I walked her to the front door. The light outside had turned soft and gold, the kind that makes even endings look gentle if you don't stare too hard. On the porch she paused, and she looked at me like she was trying to memorize my face. "I'll see you next year," she said, the words familiar, rehearsed. Except this time, her voice wavered on the last word. I swallowed. "Yeah," I said. "You always do." Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something else. Her hand lifted, hovered near my arm, then dropped. And then she surprised me, stepping forward and hugging me. It wasn't long. It wasn't desperate. It was careful, like she was afraid of pressing too hard on something already bruised. But in that brief moment, I felt everything. Every missing day, every unsaid question, every birthday candle I'd watched burn down while wondering if she was out there somewhere thinking of me too. She pulled back, and her eyes held mine. There was something in them I hadn't seen before, a kind of countdown. Then she turned and walked down the steps, her jacket catching the sunlight, her figure moving toward the street like a promise that knows it can't keep itself. I stood there holding an old key in my hand, watching her disappear the way she always does. And for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't just afraid of why she leaves. I was afraid of the thought that one year, she might not come back at all. If you've made it this far with me, don't let go now. Because that key wasn't just a memory, it was a warning. And the reason she keeps checking the time is going to change the way you hear every word she's ever said to me. If you want to stay on this road with me, subscribe and meet me in the next part, right where she left off, right before the truth finally stops hiding. The door stayed open after she left, just a little, the way it does when you forget to pull it closed all the way. I stood there for a minute listening to the neighborhood sounds return. A dog barked somewhere down the street. A screen door slapped shut. Life moved on like nothing had happened. But inside my house, the air felt different, thinner, like the room had been holding her breath while Claire was here and didn't know how to start breathing again. I went back to the kitchen and set the old key on the table between the two mugs. It looked wrong there, like a relic that didn't belong in the present. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. Then I did what I always do when something hurts in a way I can't fix. I cleaned. I rinsed the mugs. I wiped the counter. I folded a dish towel with more care than it deserved. And all the while, my mind kept snagging on what she'd said. This is the only way I know how to keep you safe. Safe from what? I told myself not to spiral. I told myself it was just a phrase. People say strange things when they're tired, when they're overwhelmed, when they're carrying something too heavy and trying not to let it show. And then I remembered her eyes, that countdown look, like she was measuring time in smaller pieces than years. By the time the sun slipped fully behind the houses across the street, I couldn't sit still anymore. I grabbed my jacket, pocketed the key without thinking, and stepped outside. The evening air had a bite to it now, not cold, just honest. I walked without a plan, letting my feet decide. My town isn't big. One main road, a few side streets, a diner that still pours coffee like it's a public service, and enough familiar faces that you can't buy groceries without running into someone who knew you when your hair was darker. I ended up at Miller's Diner because that's where my body goes when my mind can't choose. The bell above the door chimed, and the smell hit me like comfort I didn't earn. Coffee, griddle heat, something sweet in the air that reminded me of mornings that used to matter more. "Birthday boy," a voice called. It was Denise behind the counter. She's been there forever, like the diner itself is just an extension of her. She slid a menu toward me, even though we both knew I didn't need it. "Usual?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah." She poured me coffee without asking anything else. She's good like that. She knows when a man is carrying something and doesn't want it poked. I sat in the corner booth, the one by the window, and watched the world go by. Headlights. Couples walking close together. A kid on a bike weaving between streetlights. My phone buzzed once. My heart jumped so fast it made me angry. But it wasn't Claire. Just a reminder from my calendar that I'd never bothered to delete. Claire arrives. I stared at the words until they felt like a joke someone else had written in my life. Denise came back with my plate and set it down gently. "You look like you're thinking too hard," she said. "That obvious?" I tried to smile. "It's your face," she replied, not unkindly. "It always gets that faraway look around your birthday." I froze slightly. "You notice that?" Denise shrugged. "Small town. People notice things. Plus, you've been coming here on your birthday for years, looking like you're waiting on a bus that never shows." I swallowed. "It did show," I said before I could stop myself. Denise's eyebrows lifted, but she didn't push. She just leaned her elbows on the counter across from me and lowered her voice. "She came today?" My fingers tightened around the coffee mug. "Yeah." Denise nodded slowly like she'd been expecting that answer for 20 years. "You two always had a strange rhythm." I let out a breath. "You remember her?" "Of course I remember her," Denise said. "Claire had that way about her, like she was trying to be brave every second she was standing still." That landed somewhere deep in me. I stared down at my plate, appetite gone. "She brought me something," I said quietly. Denise waited. I pulled the key from my pocket and set it on the table. Just for a second, like showing it to someone would make it less unreal. Denise leaned closer, squinting. "That's old," she murmured. "It's mine," I said. "From an apartment I haven't lived in since we were kids, basically." Denise sat back, her expression shifting. Not shock, something more complicated, like recognition. "You know something," I said, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. Denise held up her hands. "I don't know anything. Not really, I I remember a night, years ago. My heartbeat picked up. What night? Denise glanced around, then leaned in again. It was your birthday. Maybe 10 years ago? Could have been longer. She came in here late, after dark. She didn't sit. She didn't order. She just stood right there by the counter, twisting her hands together like she was trying not to come apart. My throat went dry. What did she say? Denise hesitated, searching her memory. She asked for you. I told her you'd been here earlier, but you'd already left. She looked relieved and heartbroken at the same time. Then she asked me something strange. What? I whispered. She said, if he ever asks about me, please tell him I didn't leave because I stopped caring. Denise's voice softened. Then she put some money on the counter like she felt guilty for even taking up space, and she walked out. The diner noise faded in my ears. Silverware clinking, a laugh from a booth, the hum of the cooler. All I could hear was that sentence. I didn't leave because I stopped caring. My chest tightened. Why wouldn't you tell me? I asked, not accusing, just stunned. Denise's eyes held mine. Because you never asked, she said simply. And because you looked like you were surviving by not asking. That was fair. That was painfully fair. I pushed the key back into my pocket. My hands were shaking, and I didn't like that Denise could see it. Did she say anything else? I asked. Denise shook her head. Just that. But... She paused, as if deciding whether to add more. She kept looking at the clock, like it was chasing her. My stomach dropped. Denise didn't know the rule, not like I did, but she'd seen the edges of it, enough to notice what mattered. I left the diner not long after, the night air slapping some sense into me. Streetlights made the sidewalk look like a path you could follow if you believed in destinations. I walked faster than I needed to, thoughts tumbling. 10 years ago, she'd been here looking for me, and she'd left a message with the one person who wouldn't push it on me like a sermon. She didn't stop caring. Then why the silence? Why the disappearances? Why the careful way she kept her life separate from mine, like we were two countries sharing a border but never allowed to cross? I ended up driving without meaning to. The car did what it always does when my heart gets restless. It took me toward the edge of town, past the old neighborhoods and the newer developments, out toward the roads that lead to places you don't go unless you're running from something or chasing it. And then I realized where I was headed. The old apartment building. I hadn't been there in years. Not because it was far, but because it was full of ghosts that still knew my name. But that key in my pocket felt heavier with every mile, like it was pulling me toward a door I didn't want to open. The building looked smaller than it used to, like my memory had been inflating it all these years to make the past feel grander. The paint was chipped. The hallway light flickered. Someone had left a planter out front that had long since given up. I parked across the street and just sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring at the entrance. This was ridiculous, I told myself. Then again, so is spending 20 years waiting for a woman who refuses to explain why she disappears. I got out. The air smelled like asphalt and old trees. I walked up the steps, heart pounding like I was about to knock on my own history. The lobby door was locked now, the kind of building improvement that comes after you've already moved on. I pulled the key from my pocket. My fingers hovered. Of course it wouldn't work. The locks would have changed a dozen times. The universe doesn't let you stroll back into your 20s just because you're feeling brave after dinner. But my hand still moved, almost on its own, and I slid the key into the lock. It turned. Smoothly, like it had been waiting. I stood there frozen, the door slightly open, a thin line of dim hallway light spilling out like a secret. My skin prickled. I pushed the door wider and stepped inside. The lobby looked the same in the way old places do when they don't care about your feelings. The mailboxes were different. The carpet had been replaced. But the smell was the same. A mix of dust and cleaner and time. I walked down the hall toward the staircase, and halfway there I noticed something taped to the inside of the lobby bulletin board. Just a plain sheet of paper with a handwritten note in thick black marker. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It just said, "If you're here for the key, go upstairs." My breath caught, because it wasn't new. The edges were yellowed, like it had been hanging there longer than it had any right to. And underneath, in smaller handwriting, were two words that made my stomach flip. "Happy birthday." I stood there in that dim lobby, the paper trembling slightly in the draft, and all I could think was that Claire hadn't just given me a memory. She'd left me a trail, and for the first time in 20 years, it felt like she wanted me to follow it. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at that piece of paper like it might start talking if I gave it enough attention. Happy birthday. Those 2 words had followed me my whole life, but they'd never felt like this. Not like a message left behind in a building I'd almost forgotten. Not like a whisper from someone who knew I would eventually come looking. The stairwell smelled like old paint and something faintly metallic. I took the first step, then another, each one creaking just enough to remind me I was really here. The building had 4 floors. We'd lived on the 3rd, back when life felt like something you could just walk into without asking. My hand brushed the railing, worn smooth by decades of people going up and down with groceries, heartbreak, and everything in between. I kept thinking about that key, how it had worked so easily, how it was like a door had been waiting for me. That thought didn't comfort me. The 3rd floor was quiet, the kind of quiet you only get in places where people have learned not to ask each other questions. Our old apartment was at the end of the hall, 3C. I knew that without checking. The door looked different, new paint, new knob. But it still had the same small scratch near the frame, the one I'd made years ago when I tried to carry in a bookshelf that was too big for the space and for my patience. I lifted the key. For a second, my heart did something strange, like it wanted to turn around and leave my body behind. But I slid the key in anyway. It fit. The door opened into a room that wasn't mine anymore, but still felt like it knew me. The furniture was different. A small couch, a tidy little table, someone else's life, clearly. But the layout was the same, and so was the light coming through the window, soft and low and familiar. It made my chest ache in a way I wasn't prepared for. On the kitchen counter, right where we used to keep a bowl of apples that never got eaten, there was another note, same handwriting. If you're here, you're still brave. I swallowed. There was a small box beside it, no bigger than a paperback book. My hands shook as I picked it up. Inside were photographs, not old ones, recent ones. Claire standing by a lake I didn't recognize, wrapped in a sweater. Claire sitting on a bench, sunlight in her hair. Claire smiling at the camera, tired but real. And in every single picture there was someone else, not a man, a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. Dark hair, big eyes, Claire's eyes. The room felt suddenly too small. My mind went where it didn't want to go. Where it didn't want to go but went anyway. She had a child, a life, a family that wasn't me. It hit with a dull, heavy certainty that made my knees weak. All those years, all those careful boundaries, all those looks at her phone, those quiet, I can't stay too long moments. It wasn't a mystery, it was a choice. She'd built something else somewhere else, and I was the past she visited once a year like a memory you can't quite let go of. I sat down hard on the couch, the photograph spread in my lap like evidence. The little girl was beautiful in that ordinary, heart-crushing way kids are. She was laughing in one photo, holding Claire's hand in another. In one picture, Claire was looking at her the way she used to look at me, like nothing else mattered. My throat burned. So that's why she disappears, I thought. That's why she keeps me at arm's length. She didn't want to tear open 2 worlds. The anger didn't come all at once. It crept in quietly, like cold. 20 years of waiting. 20 years of birthdays spent with a woman who never planned to stay. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't want to answer it. I didn't want to hear her voice. Not now. Not when I was holding the truth in my hands. But it buzzed again, and something in me knew. "Hello?" I said, my voice rough. "Where are you?" Claire's voice came through, breathless, tight. That made something twist in my chest. "I could ask you the same thing." There was a pause. "What does that mean?" "I went to the apartment," I said. "I used the key." Silence. Not the gentle kind. The kind that presses in on your ears. "Did you find it?" she asked softly. "The pictures?" I said. "Yeah, I found them." Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice sounded smaller. "I wanted you to know. I didn't know how to tell you. Is she yours?" I asked. "Yes." The word landed like a final piece snapping into place. "I get it now," I said, staring at the photo of Claire and the little girl by the lake. "You built a life, a real one. And I'm just the place you come back to when you miss who you used to be." "That's not fair," she said quickly. "Isn't it?" My voice shook despite me trying to keep it steady. All those years I thought maybe you were protecting me from something, or maybe you were just afraid. But you were protecting something else. Someone else. Please, she said. Let me explain. What is there to explain? I asked. You have a daughter, a family, and I'm still here, setting out 2 mugs once a year like a fool. That's not what you are, she said, and now I could hear tears in her voice. I closed my eyes. Then why couldn't you just tell me? Why did you make me wait and guess and wonder if I meant anything at all? I was afraid, she whispered. Of hurting me? I asked. Of losing you, she said. That made me laugh, a short, bitter sound. You lost me a long time ago, Claire. You just never let me know it. I never stopped loving you, she said. Then why does it feel like you chose someone else? I replied. The line went quiet. I imagined her on the other end, holding her phone, trying to find the right words. But there are some truths that don't need many words. I'm coming back, she said finally. Please don't leave. Please don't go anywhere. Just wait for me. I looked around the apartment that wasn't ours anymore, at the photos that felt like a door slammed shut. Why? I asked. Because you don't understand yet, she said. And I need you to understand. I understand enough, I replied. I understand that you have a whole life I was never part of. That's not what it looks like, she said. It's exactly what it looks like, I said quietly. I hung up before she could say anything else. The room felt empty in a way that had nothing to do with furniture. I stood there, the photos still in my hand, and felt something in me finally crack. 20 years of hope collapsed into something colder. I left the apartment without putting the pictures back. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be in a place that held so many ghosts. Outside, the night had settled in, heavy and dark. Streetlights buzzed softly, uncaring. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel, my reflection faint in the glass. I had my answer now, or at least I thought I did, and it hurt more than not knowing ever had. I didn't go home. I drove until the streets thinned out and the houses gave way to stretches of road that don't care where you've been or where you're going. The dashboard clock glowed 9:42 p.m., each minute ticking past like it was quietly stealing something from me. I kept seeing the little girl's face every time I closed my eyes. Claire's eyes. That was the part that hurt the most. Not that she had built a life, but that she had built it with pieces of herself I used to think belonged only to us. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. It buzzed a second time, then a third. Finally, I pulled over by a stretch of empty field and answered without looking at the screen. What? Her breath came through the line uneven. Where are you? Not somewhere you can fix with words, I said. Please, she whispered. You left before I could explain. You had 20 years, I replied. You chose not to. That's not true, she said. I didn't know how to say it without losing you. I stared out at the dark field, tall grass moving in the wind like something alive. You lost me anyway, I said. No, she said, and there was something steady in her voice now. I almost did. That's different. I closed my eyes. Then tell me, I said. Right now. Tell me why you couldn't just say, I have a daughter and I'm sorry. There was a pause. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet, careful. Because she isn't the reason I disappear. The words landed wrong. What? She isn't why I only come once a year, Claire said. She's why I stayed alive long enough to keep coming back. My chest tightened. Claire, what are you saying? I didn't leave you because I found something better, she said. I left because something in me started to go wrong. The night felt suddenly too still. Years ago, she continued, I began losing pieces of time. Little things at first, names, streets, how to get home from places I'd been 100 times. I didn't tell anyone. I was scared. I thought it was stress, or fear, or anything but what it was. I gripped the steering wheel. What was it? I was getting sick, she said simply, in a way that doesn't show on the outside right away. My throat went dry. I left because I didn't want you to watch me become someone who couldn't remember the life we had, she went on. I didn't want you to see me forget your face. I didn't want to hurt you that way. So you disappeared? I asked, my voice breaking. You just left me to wonder if I mattered at all? I left you with love, she said softly. I just didn't know how to leave you with the truth. I shook my head, tears blurring the road in front of me even though I wasn't driving. And the little girl? She came later, Claire said. I wanted to give her a mother who still knew who she was, someone who could hold on to things while she still could. I made memories for her before the days started slipping away too fast. The pieces started rearranging in my mind, the tiredness, the counting, the way she looked at the clock like it was something she couldn't beat. You check the time, I said, slowly saying it out loud, because you're afraid of losing it. Yes, she whispered. Every year it gets harder. That's why I only come once. I need to save what I have left of myself, and I spend it with you. The words hit me harder than any accusation ever could have. You were protecting me, I said. I was protecting us, she replied, from becoming something painful instead of something beautiful. My hands trembled. And the pictures? Why leave them? So you'd know about her, Claire said. So you wouldn't think I was alone. I didn't want you to worry about me that way. And the note? I asked. I knew you'd follow the key, she said. You always were brave when it came to love. I laughed weakly through tears. You made me think you had another life that didn't need me. I do have another life, she said gently, but not one that replaces you. One that reminds me why I need to keep coming back to you while I still can. The weight of 20 years shifted inside my chest. I thought you chose someone else, I said. I chose time, she replied. Borrowed time. We stayed quiet on the line, both of us breathing, both of us holding something fragile. Come back, I said finally. Please. I'm already on my way, she said. I sat there in my car in the dark, the field whispering in the wind, and for the first time since I'd opened that apartment door, the truth didn't feel like a door closing. It felt like one opening, even if it was only going to stay that way for a little while longer. We stood by the door, and this time there was no scrambling for words, no pretending we weren't standing at the edge of something. Just two people trying to do one hard thing with gentleness. Claire reached into her jacket and pulled out a small envelope, plain and unmarked. She didn't hand it to me right away. She just held it for a second like she needed to feel its weight, like it was proof she could still choose what to leave behind. I brought this for you, she said. I glanced at it, then back at her. What is it? A way to stop the guessing, she said, voice soft but steady. Not answers to everything, just enough. She pressed the envelope into my palm. It was warm from being close to her heart. Don't open it until morning, she added. I tried to smile, but my throat tightened. You're still giving me rules. She gave me the smallest laugh, and it broke my heart in the best way. I know, I'm sorry, it feels safer this way. One more sunrise. I nodded, because I understood now that her rules weren't cages, they were bridges. She lifted her hand and rested it against my cheek, like she was memorizing the shape of me in a language that didn't require perfect recall. Thank you, she whispered, for being kind about the truth. Thank you, I said, and my voice cracked anyway, for trusting me with it. Her eyes shone under the porch light, and for a second she looked like every year we'd lost was folding back into this one moment. Then her gaze dropped to my hand. The key, she said quietly. I pulled it from my pocket like it had been waiting for this, like it belonged to the night as much as it belonged to the past. Claire covered it with her fingers, closing my fist around it gently, not taking it, just making it matter again. Keep it, she said. Not for the door, for what it stands for. I swallowed. And what's that? She held my eyes. That some places stay yours, she said, even if time tries to evict you. The porch light flickered once and I felt the hours thinning, that invisible line we never named drawing closer. Claire stepped back, only an inch, but it felt like a mile. I have to go, she said. I nodded, because I could finally say it without sounding like a man begging the universe. I know. But my body didn't want to accept it. My hands didn't want to let her become a doorway again. She touched my arm one last time, and this time, it wasn't hurried. It wasn't careful. It was deliberate, like she wanted me to remember that she was here, fully here, right up to the end of the day. Happy birthday, she said again. And this time, it didn't feel like a greeting. It felt like a promise she had fought to keep. She walked down the steps and paused at the bottom, turning back like she almost always does. But instead of that practiced, brave smile, she gave me something real, something unguarded. The kind of look you give when you want someone to understand, even if words fail. Then she got into her car and drove away, her taillights shrinking until they became just another pair of red dots swallowed by the dark. I stayed on the porch until the air turned cooler and the street went quiet again. When I finally went inside, I didn't clean. I didn't pace. I didn't try to outrun the feeling. I set the envelope on the kitchen table between the two mugs, and I placed the key on top of it like a paperweight, like an anchor. Morning came slowly. The sun spilled into the room, soft and ordinary, the way it always does when it has no idea what it's stepping into. I made coffee, 2 mugs out of habit. Then I stopped and smiled at myself, sad and fond at the same time, and put one back. Progress doesn't always look like a victory. Sometimes it just looks like telling the truth with your hands. I sat down, picked up the envelope, and opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small card. The card had an address on it, not far, just outside town. A place I recognized immediately, a lake. On the paper, in Claire's handwriting, were a few lines that hit me like warmth and gravity at the same time. She wrote that she didn't come back once a year to keep me stuck. She came back to keep me alive to my own life. She wrote that every small change she nudged into my world was never an accident. The radio shop job I took because she'd casually mentioned it one birthday. The diner I started going to because she said Denise made the best coffee. The curtains I finally changed because she'd once laughed about how I never let sunlight in. She'd been leaving me tiny doors to walk through, even when she couldn't stay. And at the bottom, she wrote one last thing. Not dramatic, not grand, just honest. She wrote, "Tomorrow, if you want, go to the lake, bring the key. Not because it opens anything there, but because I want you to have one place in the world where you can think of me and still feel peace." I sat there a long time, the paper trembling slightly in my hand, and I realized the ache in my chest had changed shape. It wasn't just missing anymore, it was gratitude. It was the quiet understanding that love doesn't always look like staying. Sometimes it looks like returning, over and over, until the person you care about finally learns how to keep living when you're not in the room. Later that day, I drove to the lake. I didn't bring flowers. I didn't bring speeches. I brought the key. I stood at the water's edge and let the wind move through me. And for the first time in 20 years, the question that used to haunt me didn't feel sharp. It felt answered. Not with perfect certainty, with something better, with meaning. And if you've walked through this story with me, I'd really like to know what part hit you the hardest. The yearly visits, the key, the moment the truth finally took its mask off. And if you want more stories that feel real and stay with you after the screen goes dark, subscribe and stay close. I'll be here.